Hi, this is Andrew Mason with another Small Group Churches Hangout, and we are honored, we are excited today to have with us Steve Gladen from Saddleback Community Church. Steve, thanks for being with us here today.
Andrew, great to join you. This is where the northern and the southern parts of California come together in a common cause.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm up here in Sacramento, Steve down there in Southern California. I actually just got to be with you at the lobby gathering. What a great event. Was so blessed to be there, and I'm sure you've gotten lots of great feedback from it after doing it.
Yeah, whenever you gather small group point people for a retreat setting, it's just a win. And if there was zero relevant content, there's plenty of relational content that happens there. But just to be able to, gather people together and help people connect is beautiful.
Definitely relational content and relevant content. Definitely. Let's jump in here. Let's jump in. What's one of the most common questions you get asked? I mean, obviously, you guys have recently launched over 8,000 small groups, which I can't even get my mind around.
Me either.
You have leaders calling you from all over the world. So this question is not your. This is different. Asking you this question. What is one of the most common questions you get from leaders, and how do you address that?
Yeah, and no matter what the question is, I usually find out people are asking me. They'll call into me. The question usually is, how can I get more leaders? How do I get small groups started in my church? How are we like Saddleback, where you get 120% of your people in small groups? So we've had, since 2004, more people in small groups and in our weekend attendance. So the questions come off a felt need. But then where I'll always end up redirecting people towards is asking the more pertinent question for them, and that is, if you have a fully orbed disciple, I mean, if you've done your job perfectly and your church said, wow, this is it, well, then what is it? And I usually use the analogy by saying, if I were going to invite you to my house and I just said, hey, come to Southern California, or if I just said, come to Orange County, if I said to you, Andrew, just come to Orange County, well, that gets you within 3.1 million people of my house, which you're like going, well, great. I mean, we've gone from 300 million people in the United States, and I'm closer, but I'm not where I need to be. But if I said, well, come to Trabuco Canyon, you're still only within 40,000 people of my house. Even if I said, come to my subdivision, and you're like going, okay, well, that's still 273 houses. That's a lot of houses I got to knock on before I get to you. And even if I gave you my street, you're still going to say, dude, would you just give me your address? And what I find out is in most churches, we don't tell our people the intended destination or where we want them to go. We're really great at saying, hey, be like Jesus, or get people to follow Jesus and stuff like that. And as vague as our answer is as vague as the product you get. And one of the things when I meet with churches, I usually, will pass a blank 3x5 card around to them, to the senior leadership, and I say, write what you're trying to do. And as many people around the tables, as many different versions of what I get. And so what happens is when your senior leadership doesn't know articulately where we are trying to get to, and at Saddleback Church, it's trying to put the Great Commission and the Great Commandment in the heart of every person. But then you say, well, how do I do that? And so that's where small groups come into play, because when you know your intended destination, then your tools, your training, your infrastructure, your curricula, everything will help groups get to that success. And a great tool for you that are small group point leaders watching this out there, you can just survey a few of your small group leaders and say, hey, what's success for your small group? Yeah. And if they're not articulating the same thing, then you're just going to be a few degrees off. And what I tell senior leadership is, if you're 1 degree off when you leave port to sail to an island, by the time you're a couple hours out on the sea, you are way off course. Wow. And so for most churches, the question is always, all about small group ministry. But where we end up going back to is saying, where do you as a church, what is it you're trying to produce? And then from that point, you can start backing out and saying, okay, So what's the delivery system your church needs? Is it Sunday school? Is it small groups? Is it, I don't care what the gatherings are called, but you need community to hold accountability to be able to produce that. You know, what's the trainings that you have? What are all the other little things that that you need in your church to get that to happen? So
just for example, Mark Howe, I was just talking to him, and he referred me to your guys is that you helped write the spiritual assessment, spiritual planner, so you can send him a commission check, by the way. But would that be an example?
I get zero.
Would that be an example of a tool that you guys use that reinforces the answer to that question of what you're trying to create?
No, and you're actually bringing up a great question that even we as churches, once we figure out the tool, then we have to figure out what's the relevant means that people will engage in that tool. The tool you're referring to hasn't changed very much, but the methodology has. When we first started out 12 years ago with that tool, it was in paper form. And then it went to a web tool. And now both the health assessment and which is the most important thing, is the health planner for the individual and the group planner are now on apps in the Droid and Apple stores. Wow. Because more people look at this screen. So this little screen right here. And so what we got to do is we got to go to where our people are, not make them come to where we are. Because like in training, another thing is we do training the same principles. You know, we work on the Great Commission and Great Commandment. You know, how do we help people or groups understand fellowship, discipleship, ministry, evangelism, and worship? You know, in the same way in our training now, we do more of an online and sometimes even asynchronistic training where people can go out and grab it wherever they need it. So again, the principles never change, but our methodologies have adapted over the 17 years I've been here at Saddleback Church.
And I just think that's so incredible that you guys have turned that into an app. It's actually the Transform Me app, that you've taken that assessment and planner and put it into a digital app form. And just to let our viewers know, that actually you can use that for any church. It's not just exclusive to Saddleback Church, correct?
Well, right now it is, and because one of the things that Rick wants to make sure is that it works before we push it out to churches. Just a fun little throwaway is that Rick never grew up in a church over 100, and so his heart has always been to the guy who doesn't have the staff, the guy who doesn't have the, and I say guy, I mean Southern California, guy or girl, but it's you know, so he wants us to always build things that are available. And so the same thing with both of these apps. I think, Andrew, what you say is exactly true. It hopefully once we get out of our beta testing with it for about a year, then if a church wants to write their own API from their database to that tool, you can use it however you want. The great thing is that it's designed in such a way where you, as the end user, as the church, you can write your own, you know, spiritual formation next steps, because the assessment both on the group side and on the individual side is not the great stuff. The great stuff is when you put a planner in place. One of the phrases I have written on my board, my whiteboard, I've had it for now the whole 17 years I've been here, or just about, was vision without implementation equals hallucination. And because oftentimes at churches we're great at vision, but we really suck at implementation. And the great thing about these tools is that they provide crawl, walk, run next steps, so that people can put a planner in place, because every one of us want discipleship to happen. But unless you put a plan in place and you invite community around you, you're never going to grow. And I don't care if that community is your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your kids or your small group. I mean, it's going to be a combination of a lot of players. But you know, the old saying, it takes a village to raise a kid. You know what? It takes a village to raise me right, and I'm 50 plus. That's painful to say, but you know, it's one of those things. It takes a lot of people to make us who we are.
Amen. Amen. Last question. What's something in the area of small group leadership that you've learned in the last year or so?
Well, I don't know if it's the last year or so, but it's definitely been a theme that I have seen play through my life and ministry. Is a couplefold. Is that God use excuse me, God uses broken people. Um, he uses people that we wouldn't think would be the people, because so often in our churches we're looking for the right leadership things, and no poo-poo on finding great leaders and building into them. But when you look at how Jesus chose the disciples, he didn't pick the pretty people, he didn't pick the who's who, he didn't pick the wealthy people, he didn't pick the people that were the most social media present. He didn't even pick the most biblical literate people, that had been the Pharisees or Sadducees, to be with him. He picked the people who are willing to go on the journey and just to go and let Jesus, adapt them and make them more like a follower of Christ. And so one of the things I've learned in ministry is being able to engage people and their friends, no matter what starting point they are, but be able to take them to where they want to be. For those of you that have played on team sports, a good coach helps you do the things you don't want to do so you can be the player you want to be on game day. And part of our responsibility is to do the same thing. So I think one of those great learnings I always see happening is God uses imperfect people, and not everyone's going to do it like me, which I think is wrong. But the whole thing is that God uses all different kinds of people to shape all different kinds of people on this planet. So even at Saddleback, and this is going to sound like pure heresy, so maybe you'll edit it out a little bit later.
You guys have never been accused of that, right?
Oh no, never, ever. But the thing is that we've learned is we've even engaged people, and being able to say, even if you're not a follower of Christ and you want to start a group with a couple of friends, we learn a couple things, and one of them is that when we don't matchmake, we get out of the eHarmony business. We don't do any of that at Saddleback, but we just say, hey, if you got two friends, you can start a group. Now, what happens with that is, and this is a whole diatribe of stuff I can go to later, but on another hangout. But if you want to know who your leaders are, they're the ones with followers. And so we say, if you want to start a group, just grab a couple of your friends. Because if you have people who just say, hey, I'll do all your leader training, and then, hey, send me people to do my group, you've trained somebody who thinks they're a leader, but they're not a leader because they don't have followers.
Wow.
But one of the things we've even built into our small group system is that when you know the end in mind and you put two primary guardrails up on your road, which is a cognitive track, which is your training and your tools, and a relational track, which is your infrastructure or the relationships. And if you have some DVD curriculum, you can help people not drive their group off the road. Now, before I mess you up here, one of the things that I truly believe is a couple things, is that when there is somebody at your church who is willing to grab a couple of their friends and start a group using your curricula, then they're not even if they're not a follower of Christ, they're not an Al-Qaeda sleeper cell trying to destroy your church. They come to your church because they like it. They see something that they don't have, and so they're attracted to you. So part of what you want to do is engage them where they're at, but always have the tools and the training and the infrastructure and the curriculum to get them where you want them to be. And when you look at Jesus, he did the same thing. When he engaged the disciples, it was follow me. 3 years later, it was die for me. And so there's a big chasm between those things. So one of the things is that we believe people who are seeking Christ are not our enemy. The other thing, I always have people come up to me and they say, yeah, but if you have people who aren't members of your church, aren't followers of Christ, and they're starting groups and stuff like that, they're going to, contaminate the church, or they're going to mess something up spiritually. And I've got a large network of small groups. And when I look at all my Jerry Springer action that's happening and, all these little headaches, I'm like going, really? When I look at that, they're people who know Jesus. They're people who are members. The problem is when we become followers of Christ, our stupid gene doesn't go away. And so the thing is you've always got to have infrastructure in place to be able to guide people along the way. So a very long, convoluted answer to a simple question, but it's been engaging in the organic power of people, and broken people at that, but being able to have a system in place in your church that says, I want to take a broken person and help them be a whole lot better. And the other throwaway there is when you start a group with someone who may not know Jesus and they invite their two friends, more likely than not, those two friends are not followers of Christ. And in some churches, we call that evangelism when we get them to do that. But why split hairs and all that?
Wow. Well, thank you for the convoluted answer, because there is a wealth of knowledge in that convoluted answer. I already know I'm going to have to go back and watch this video 2 or 3 times here and take down some notes. Steve, I know there's a lot more you could share with us, but we're gonna leave right there. But I just want to mention Steve's book, Small Groups with Purpose, outstanding resource for small group leaders. Also, he has a website for small group pastors, small group point people, smallgroupnetwork.com. Also, if you check out smallgroups.net/free, there's a whole page of free resources there. One of the things I love about Steve is he shares the wealth, and it's all out there if you can just be diligent and you're okay reading off screens and downloading stuff and printing stuff out. There's a whole treasury of knowledge that he's made available to people online. So, Steve, thank you for taking some time with us here today.
No problem. Great hanging out with you.
All right. God bless.
Me too.